So I am back on stage. This is the last time during this session, I promise. So now it was just very emotional. We talked about communication, and we're now going to talk about norms. However, that's not only boring and dry, I can promise you that, but it is also, and that is what Mr. Reinhold already said just now, it is very, very important, specifically when it comes to sustainability and the circular economy in general. So overall, it's a constantly relevant topic. So I don't want to say that it's only the Green Deal that matters, etc., or something that only grew in importance over the past few years. Norming has always been very, very important when it comes to vinyl windows, but it also grew in terms of political relevance. So that's why it's new. So regulatory bodies also used norms for different things. So, for example, as a tool for themselves when it comes to setting new rules and regulations. So, I would like to give you an overview of these different projects and also show you our engagement being EPPA when it comes to norms. So, most of you in this room already saw the introduction of EPPA. I'm still going to repeat it anyways because I'm not sure if you just joined us online, for example. So I would just like to tell you very briefly what has been done for vinyl windows when it comes to different norms and what the relevance is in our market, and also a couple examples of current projects. All right, so you may have heard it before, you may not have. So being in a European Economic Association for vinyl window treatments, we are representing 90% of the production for the European market, and that would be about 4 billion in revenue. And of course, recycling is a very important topic for us, not only for us in the association, but also for the whole industry. And that is why we already have 50% of a closed circular economy. So that means old profiles becoming new profiles, and the other 50% would be controlled. So that we building products, about 25% of the overall material used in the profile industry is being used for that. And of course, that is also what we are going to refer to. And last year and the year before was more than 350,000 recycled profile waste units. And that is us as an association in Brussels. And now talking about norms for vinyl windows specifically. So again, there are different topics that are very relevant. So of course, we have national and European experts who are very relevant, and they are looking at the current situation. So the current status, state of the art when it comes to vinyl windows. And of course, because they actually look into the status quo of the European and central level, and they are harmonizing it, trade and also using them and maintaining the system in the European market is very much simplified. And because of that, I would also say it's very clearly relevant to the market directly. Of course, there are different areas that come into play. So we have the category profile norms, that would be EN 12608 series. And then we also have /1 that is describing the profile that is white. Lots of additional norms are still being processed at the moment. So, for example, laminated profiles, etc., and also bigger profiles that are described. Then we also have the window norm. That's a harmonized product norm. That's the EN 14351/1, and I'm going to talk about that in more detail later. That's not tied to materials, really just about windows made of all different materials, aluminum, wood, etc. And that is also the basis for CE. That's why it's so important. We also have many different material norms. That would be the EN 1534 series, and that describes the material in and of itself, mainly when it comes to recyclate and also for waste, and not only for PVC, but also for others, for other polymers. And I'm going to talk about that in detail later on as well. And for windows, we also have a circular norm, which is also very important. And of course, that's related to vinyl windows and how it can be in this controlled cycle to be recycled. And of course, in and of itself, that is not new. There are no new requirements or anything like that that are going to be defined, but they are referencing all the different norms that already exist today. So they are describing the whole life cycle of a window, a vinyl window specifically, and it therefore allows simplification of working with the under norms that are relevant for windows. And on the left-hand side, you can also see the check norms. And of course, they're also important considering the harmonized norm. And of course, they're focused on the individual regulations and the setup, etc. So it could be chubby, etc. Okay, so I just said, oh, hold on one second. I'm sorry. Maybe I should just tell you something about where you would see norms, because you and of course window builders are usually not directly active when it comes to all the different groups for norming, but they're in touch with them if they have to look into quality certifications, for example. So the most common private and also public certifications, CISTB, etc., are always based on these norms and on the results of these norms that we have on a European and national level. And that's why the end consumer is also directly affected by the results of these norms. CE, I already mentioned that, and the CE labeling. So again, that is the result of norming work in European groups. So that would be SEN. All right, now talking about goals. What you see here are just the political norms that are relevant. So I said earlier that over the past few years, that has definitely increased a lot, just because regulatory bodies, specifically in the European space, are definitely focusing on norms a lot more, doing a lot more work there. And if you think about the Circular Plastics Alliance, where there are very clear goals when it comes to using recycled materials, etc., we have clear goals until 2025, also differentiated by industry. So you can see building construction, agriculture, electronics, packaging, and also automotive. Automotive would then be separate for the sector. They're working on different solutions for different industries. So, of course, you also want to focus on norms in order to cover all the technical details on a European level. That is something that you see in four different areas on the left-hand side. So, it would be the material that is being used, then it would be recyclate in general, then it's about design for recycling. So, what does the product need to look like so that at the end of the life cycle, it can be recycled with its individual components. Of course, also differentiating between different waste materials is important, also characterizing the quality of the individual pieces and recyclates. So again, it's really about the whole circle and again, considering all the individual sectors and industries. Again, based on based on this political explanation in terms of what needs to be accomplished, the Commission is currently in discussion, and we'll only talk about a couple weeks here. They're working on a standardization request, so that means that they're asking CEN, being the European norming organization, to actually work out norms for specific areas, and that is what you see here, the ones that are mentioned here. And again, collaboration of experts is definitely needed, so from companies directly and also from us being the association. So that's the one that is very, very important. So again, that's the norming group, the group that is dealing with plastics and vinyls, etc., etc. And then there are several subgroups, and that is then based on different industries. So the norming experts are coming in, they're saying, okay, this is what the standard is like in the market. This is your requirement. This is the standard. This is the political context. And then the question is, okay, how can we consolidate all of that? And with that, we are connecting all these norms. So the political thought is also very important, and we're connecting that to the technical reality. Not all of these norms are new. We have to say that as well. However, I am also going to show you on the next slide what kind of norms we're talking about. Many of them are reworked, but again, this is definitely quite a lot. There are two slides. This is just the first one. So a lot of these things revolve about the design for recycling as well. And as I said in the beginning, we actually did all the work in the political context, but now we're starting with norming them. So for every product that there is, and also for windows, doors, etc. There are different use cases. When it comes to packaging, for example, all of that needs to be designed for recycling, and these norms have to be worked out. And then we also have the design for recycling for agriculture, which is also important. So products in the agricultural sector, so all the different foils that you're familiar with that are out in the fields, for example. So the quality recycling is very important. You're going to be able to see that on the next slide. So again, it is really very much about how can I actually ensure the quality of a recyclate, and how can you determine it? What do you have to do in order to do that? What do you have to look into? And also how can you characterize it afterwards, and also have different quality classes and categorize them like that. In order to be able to do that, the previous step would be to really think about, okay, how can you also evaluate the waste by using these different norms and characterizing them, and then you have the whole value added chain, and you just start with material, and then later it would be the design with the material in this new product. It would be the product basis. So all of that is down here, overall, we have 45 norms in the next 2.5 years. So by 2025, that was the commitment we made. That is the declaration. So 2.5 years pass by super quickly, anyways. But when it comes to norming, it's definitely something that is very much fast. Usually, you have 3 to 5 years if you do it very quickly. Sometimes it can be longer than that, and specifically because everybody's on board. There are national associations that are going to evaluate everything in the national context, and of course, they then give feedback to the European Association, and because everybody's on board, it definitely takes a long time as well. However, I still noted that it is worth it. It is worth it because it's not only about the political will that's behind it, but it's also, and that's what I said in the beginning, it's really also about the requirements and really implementing them on a technical basis and having them in the market, and that's how it's supported as well. So if it's centralized, it is definitely very good. So if not everybody's going to have to do it in every industry, in every country, and they're just going to have to reinvent the wheel. So I'd like to give you an example of a norm that's not part of the standardization request. So it wouldn't be via the alliance, but it is still very, very meaningful for us in the future, especially in the near future. This is a norm that already exists. It's EN 15343, and that would be traceability and transparency when it comes to that value added chain, when it comes to vinyls. So it would be PVC as well and vinyl windows, but not exclusively. And of course, that is something that's currently very generic. I wouldn't say that it isn't super long. It's not very detailed either. And of course, that gives some room for interpretation as well. And that is now being reworked, just like every other norm as well. Every 5 years, they're going to be reworked, confirmed. And why is it so important? Well, I would say that it is also important for the personal and private certification units. And also, what is going to be said now in terms of requirements for traceability and transparency is going to be important for the value added chain. So they're going to look into these norms. They're going to say, okay, what is state of the art at the moment? That's why it's so important that we are going to be very active and realistically look at all the different circumstances in the market. And of course, we're going to have to answer questions like, how do I know that the proportion of recyclate is correct? What is the recyclate? Where is the material, etc.? What was my recyclate in the past? Was it a window or was it something else? And then also, how am I going to have to adapt and improve my product in regards to sustainability? Who do I work with? How far away are they, etc.? So, of course, there's also room for digital solutions, and of course, they're going to be more important in the future, or at least we're going to need to give room for that to happen so that these norms can be implemented digitally. So, that is going to be what we're going to do over the next few weeks and months, being the association that we are. All right, another example, and I just mentioned that as well, would be the CE labeling for Windows. And like I said, 40351-1, that is the go-to norm for Windows, and it's also the basis for what the window is if you want to have it in the market. But it is very much outdated. It is from 2016, the way it is active at the moment. So it's not state of the art anymore. It had been reworked in the past, but it is now finished. Unfortunately, it was never published. So that means that if you actually want to use the CE labeling now and you want to explain the performance, you cannot refer back to state of the art or the current norm, but instead it would be the older norm that you're using. Why? Because there are structural problems when it comes to norming because of the regulation that is in place. This is the harmonized product norm, and it's not only about state of the art, but it's also legal requirements that were set in the past. And of course, when it comes to this norm, is going to have to be implemented for this product. And if it's not clear that that was done properly, or the legal requirements aren't easy to understand or clear to understand, then of course that's going to be blocked. And this norm is not going to be cited, not like a regulation, and that's why it can't be implemented. So of course, there's a great discrepancy between SEN and also the regulatory bodies. So what is happening legally and also what is happening on a technical level. And also norming processes can be very, very long. So if you want to change something on short notice, it's gonna cost you a couple months. So it's not easy at all. And that's why things just have to happen urgently. Of course, the commission knows that as well. That's not a problem that is only focused on Windows, but it is also something that we see in almost every byproduct that we have today. So the CE label is required for most of them. And what is the result of that? Well, of course, that is also going to threaten our market in general, our internal market. We have a national regulation, and member states, of course, are trying to counteract that. And of course, they then have new requirements that only are valid in the national context, so that the building products are maybe on top of what was state of the art 5 or 6 years ago. So, of course, that is different in every member state. And of course, that is then definitely threatening free trade in our internal markets. And of course, it is also very, very expensive and requires a lot of effort. So the Commission now thought about a solution. The low solution could be a key. So that would make it where the whole process of definition of technical requirements and also the definition per product group could just be up to us. So that means that we don't need so much SEN because that just requires a lot of time, and we don't need the experts from Zen, but we can also just have experts and they can then determine these requirements. So that means that there's a ministry from a member state and they could then send one person for building products, for example, and the likelihood of this person actually knowing all the different building products that are available in Europe is very much unlikely. So, of course, there is a big threat that the detailed knowledge of these experts in the operative sense cannot be considered. The legal framework is a lot better. And of course, that could be one of the main focuses, but the product specific expertise is definitely something that is questionable. And last but not least, I would also like to say that this was planned for Windows in Q2 2022. That's when we wanted to get started. And we're definitely on top of the list, as you can see, or pretty far up. However, we are not the one whose turn it is right now. There's a delay in this process, unfortunately. And however, still, we're going to have to welcome that the Commission is looking for a solution and they're not going to just leave it as is. They're just going to say, okay, we're just going to wait for the regulation to be reworked. 5 years don't make a difference. Well, they do make a difference. And that's why it is good that we are now doing this. We're just going to continue on being the European Association and we're going to find ways to get the nomination because the Commission can also tell that if we have detailed questions about a product, then I'm going to need a little bit more. Okay, this is my last slide. Hopefully, it became clear that norms are definitely a very imperative part for the work when it comes to vinyl window systems in Europe. And that is something that affects everybody that deals with vinyl windows. And over the past few years, that is something that we have specifically tried to do that politically as well. We wanted to implement technically what is wanted on the part of the government and what is just feasible makes sense. And of course, they also look into the circular model in detail. And of course, the approaches as well. So that means what kind of norms do I have to rework and how do I do it? Who do I need to take on board when it comes to this Green Deal, etc. And of representing our houses. Of course, we are also part of these groups ourselves, we're represented as well. And of course, we're trying our hardest to build this bridge between these two worlds. And of course, that is something that can be quite difficult. But with a vinyl window system, we have a product that is a success model for this circular economy and for these value added change that I was talking about. So therefore, when it comes to norms, it is definitely something that is very, very strong